Hey guys, it's me, Bo, back once again on the Film Scene Investigation channel with another cult movie review. I hope everyone is doing good. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the 2004 Hooligan drama, The Football Factory. When it comes to hooligan films, this one in particular is fondly remembered for its near perfect mix of humour and violence. Before we get into it, guys, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. All the support is greatly appreciated. So, The Football Factory from 2004 was directed by Nick Love and written by A.J. Lavelle. The movie starred a very young Danny Dyer in the lead role, and the movie was very popular when it was released back in 2004. I remember the hype surrounding this movie when it was released over 20 years ago now. It was discussed between all my friends at school, and we even thought at some point there might be a sequel, but it never happened. There's no denying that this film's success definitely sparked a mixture of hooligan-related content in the early to mid-2000s, with such films like Green Street and The Rise of the Foot Soldier. So, in terms of the plot, the movie followed the Cockney hooligan Tom Johnson, played by Danny Dyer. He was a part of the Chelsea hooligan firm with his best mate Rod, played by Neil Maskell. These guys lived for the weekend. They drank heavily, chatted up girls in clubs, and of course loved getting into fights. You know, the firm was an important part of their lives. It was basically their identity, and it was all they cared about. I think that was because these guys, like so many out there, wanted to be a part of something. They searched for a purpose, and they found the firm. The loudmouth Billy Bright, played by actor Frank Harper, was another one of Tom's friends in the firm. Billy was one of the senior members, one of the older guys, and was eyeing up the possibility of one day taking over. But it was clear from the get-go that the only one that was gonna hold Billy back was himself. You see, he had an ego, he was rude, he was cocky, and it was only a matter of time before he would land himself in trouble, which he did. You know, I really enjoyed the Billy character, and honestly, Frank Harper kind of stole the show with his performance. Yes, of course, the character was slightly exaggerated, but I myself have met people like Billy Bright in real life, and they do exist. Harper definitely brought a realistic vibe to the film. The film culminated in this epic clash between the two firms of Chelsea and Millwall. Dozens of fans from both sides showed up ready to fight each other. You had both groups shouting abuse at each other before engaging in an all-out brawl. It was pure chaos, and in some ways it was kind of hard to follow what exactly was going on. Fists were flying all over the place as a police helicopter flew overhead. It was just a very violent sequence. We ended up seeing Tom getting stomped on and a brick shoved in his face, knocking him out completely unconscious, and sending him to the hospital. It was not for the faint-hearted, but then again, this was a hooligan film, and such scenes as knocking people out, blood everywhere, is kind of a staple for this genre of film. So, before the film closed, we actually saw Tom make a full recovery from his injuries and subsequently become a legend among his friends. The vicious attack that Tom sustained didn't put him off leaving the firm. In fact, he only became more emboldened with his newfound popularity. And with that ending, it kind of leaves open the possibility of a sequel down the road, maybe seeing Tom maybe take over the firm. But yeah, like I mentioned, no sequel ever happened. In terms of Danny Dyer, I thought he delivered a great performance as Tom Johnson. And yeah, I mean, he basically carried the film. And besides Billy Bright, I thought his character was the most interesting. I mean, the film itself catapulted Danny Dyer's career and made him a nationwide celebrity. And yeah, I can see why. From his mannerisms to his interactions with the other characters, Dyer was very convincing in the role. His character never seemed out of place. He was very likable and also, more importantly, very relatable. The heyday of British hooliganism was in the 1980s, but by the time we got to 2004, society had changed and fights among football fans were seen less often. You know, I'm not saying that it didn't happen. Of course, you know, even today, hooliganism is still around, but just on a much smaller scale. So, with that in mind, I would say that The Football Factory actually acted more like a love letter to the British hooliganism of the past. The movie exaggerated the idea of hooligan firms still being active in the early 2000s, when in reality they were likely dissolved or disbanded. But you know, this isn't a dislike from me, because seeing a hooligan film kind of set in modern day, I found to be quite interesting. The film also featured a great soundtrack, including songs from the likes of the Libertines, Primal Scream and the Buzzcocks. The songs themselves fit perfectly within the movie's gritty urban aesthetic. From indie rock to techno rap, the soundtrack had a really good mixture of old and new music. It's clear that the film's editor, Stuart Gazzard, attempted to use the songs almost as another character within the film. The music drove the scenes forward, especially during the fight sequences. Just great stuff, and credit to the filmmakers for their creative song choices. And so, dislikes for The Football Factory 2004. My biggest dislike for this film would have to be the subplot that involved Tom's granddad, Bill, played by actor Dudley Sutton. So first off, and I should have probably mentioned this earlier, but if you haven't seen this film already, this movie has like a dozen subplots, some more interesting than others. The Bill character, Tom's granddad, was this miserable, lonely old man without a wife, yearning for a change in his life. Early on, we saw Bill's best friend, Albert, suddenly pass away, which only added to his grief. The Bill character came in and out of the film, interacting with Tom and the other characters. You know, Bill was never directly involved in any hooliganism. Instead, we saw him try and pick up the pieces in his life, but it was that really slowed down the film's pace. I mean, at times it was like the film suddenly became all about him, and I just wasn't interested enough to care. I mean, if the Bill character had gotten involved with the firm, maybe organising the fights or whatever, then yeah, that may have been interesting. But what we got was scenes of Bill travelling on a bus, having an argument with teenagers, and then having a heart attack at the side of the road. The whole time I was thinking, okay, great, can we get back to Tom and all the hooligan stuff, please? Yeah, it was a letdown, and I actually think the character had a little too much screen time. It's just so dull, and yeah, when it comes to me rewatching this movie, I tend to skip all of Bill's scenes. And so, ratings for The Football Factory 2004. I'm going to be rating this movie a solid 4.5 out of 10. The Football Factory was a good hooligan drama that featured a host of memorable performances that were sufficient to transcend this dated subject matter. Taking a step back and looking at this whole film, sadly, I do feel that there should have been more focus on Tom and his fighting habits rather than the various subplots with the side characters. In a way, it could be argued that The Football Factory was more of an ensemble piece rather than a star vehicle for Danny Dyer. I guess it also could be argued that this movie is kind of dated in the sense of the demographics of London changing rapidly over the last 20 years. There wasn't much diversity in this movie, and I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. Diversity kind of gets pushed round down audiences' throats these days, but just a lot. Me being a Londoner and seeing how immigration has kind of been on the rise in the last 20 years. The social makeup of the country, especially London, has changed. So in that sense, me watching this movie now, it is kind of dated. When it comes to the director, Nick Love, I can't say I'm a huge fan of his work. His movies tend to start strong, but then lose their way. I've seen a bunch of Nick Love projects, and from the ones that I have seen, The Football Factory is undeniably his best work. One of the film's strengths was that the characters felt very relatable. Now, of course, I'm a Londoner, so my viewpoint is slightly skewed, but still, I have met people in real life that were very similar to those like Tom and his crew. What's crazy to me is that indeed this movie came out 20 years ago. I still remember discussing this movie in class with my friends when we should have been concentrating on our work. And so I don't know, time flies, I guess. If you have seen this one, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks to Google Analytics, I realized that a large majority of my audience are from America, so I'm not too sure if many of my American audience has seen this movie, but if you have, I'd love to hear your views below. For those who haven't seen it, I do recommend it, especially if you're into British football culture. Just be prepared that at times it is quite violent and there is a lot of profanity. And well, that's all from me today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I will of course be back next week with another cult movie review. Don't forget to subscribe, and of course, take care.